Hello, dear chess lovers. Like to play in this position. This was your homework some months ago. What should black play? That's a very instructive position that gives a segue to today's episode. We are discussing the logical breakdown of chess tactics today, folks. I truly believe in the value of verbalizing and having a logical narrative around chess tactics so you have a higher chance of finding those in your games. The tactical team we will talk about today, folks, is removing the defender. A very pervasive chess tactic, which is also landing nicely to logical narratives because we can explain the situation in terms of logical breakdown. For example, in this position, the white queen is tied down in guarding against queen g5 check, correct? So this white queen is the defender of the key g5 square. Otherwise, it will be mate. And as you know, queens are the worst defenders in chess because any lower piece can chase the queen away. The queen needs to move against attack by a lower valued piece. So when it comes to this understanding that if a piece is tied down on a defensive task, removing the defender tactics become available. So this is the function of you having a logical narrative and giving yourself, those logical breakdowns in the orientation phase. What is going on in this position? Yes, the queen is paralyzed in guarding against queen g5 check, and this observation increases your chances to find the winning move for black. And that's what we'll be training in today's episode. I will also give you so many tricky puzzles where sometimes you need to avoid the blunder, right? We're not having a puzzle rush today. Just because the move looked great doesn't mean that you should play it. Okay, let's start from this position, folks. So queen g5 check is a devastating idea and the queen is tied down. So this move d4, if it was in your radar, you're a great player, folks, because this simply wants to remove the defender of the key g5 square, correct? If queen takes on d4, queen g5 is made. This is, of course, a very basic point. If queen f4, congratulations. If you found the follow-up g5, it's a beautiful pawn fork. Another tactical team, by the way. When those pieces are lined up with one square in front of them, pawn fork tactical team becomes available, right? So that pattern should be jumping, basically, right? Once you see this position, g5 just wins the game for black. What else? Well, this leaves us with a single check on e8 after king h7, after queen e4 check g6. Your checks are running out, and suddenly white is basically helpless against this threat, but also this threat of queen takes f2 check, and everything is collapsing. For example, if white plays the move queen g4 to stop queen g5 check, I can take on f2 with check. After queen g3 comes a question again, folks. You see, the king is now tied down in guarding that queen. So there's a tactic available to black. Please stop the video and find that cute and short sequence that wins material for black. Of course, we start with g5 because our goal is to set the following tactic to remove the guard of the queen on g3, right? We have an attacking queen, they have a defending king, and black has a beautiful move here. Two moves actually, h5 or even f5, the same idea, right? You want to remove the defender and win the queen on g3 with a winning position. This single example highlighted beautifully to us what happens to you when you tie down your queen to a very important defensive duty, right? So it's a multi-purpose puzzle because by engaging in this puzzle, we learn to look at the right directions. We learn to logically break down the situations that increase the chances to find a tactic that speaks to the position. We learn to spend some time in this orientation phase where we gather information. For example, queen g5 check is an idea. This pawn is loose because it's hit once and defended also only once by the queen, right? This queen is completely paralyzed, by the way, folks. I mean, look at this. She needs to guard f2 and g5 at the same time. Overworked piece. And that's the definition of an overworked piece, which allows such simple removing the guard tactics, okay? If you start with g5 directly, it doesn't work. Because after king h5, queen h2, well, the king will survive after take on h6 followed by king takes g5. There is no mate. And since there is no mate, white is surviving in this position. In fact, white is slightly better in this position. Look what black has done by engaging in this direct checks. they have destroyed their position basically, right? Obviously, we have to spend time in those forcing moves. But since king h5 doesn't give us any clear advantage, we have to give ourselves more choices on this move as well. And that's also what makes this position instructive, because you're giving yourself several candidate moves by this logical breakdown. You try to understand the essence of this position, and once you observe the queen as completely tied down, this becomes an option for black. White to play in this position, folks. Please stop the video and find the winning move for white. That's a tactic that you can get in Puzzle Rush. Okay, so I'll just start with a simple example, but I want you to look at the beautiful things in this position. I want you to understand the essence of this position. What is the defender that you want to remove in this position? What are you seeing? Let's do it together, folks. Can you see the knight on g5 and the queen on c2? And can you see the h7 pawn is hit twice, but only guarded twice? And now from this observation, can you understand that knight on f6 is tied down in guarding against queen takes h7 mate? So if there's a way for us to remove the defender of h7, then we will mate the black king. So this logical breakdown should give you an idea of a nice looking candidate. Reverse engineering. Is there a way for us to remove this knight on f6 by engaging in a forcing move? Is there a forcing way for white to remove the knight from that spot? And you're a great player if you found the move knight d7, folks. Look at this. The knight hits the queen and also the main defender of h7, and black is losing, because if your knight captures my knight, then you see the point, right? Mate follows, and well, the queen has to move. Queen moves somewhere, then I take on f6, removing the defender with check, followed by queen takes h7 mate. Isn't it cute? Isn't it beautiful? But this, you see, it's not a move that randomly pops from the background, but you actually ask yourself those basic questions. You need to observe that knight being a tied down piece, overworked piece, right? This knight is basically nailed in guarding h7. And this gives white an idea to remove the guard. The first example was about the queen being tied down in a specific square. This time we see a tied down knight on a specific pawn in this case. Let's say square h7 or pawn h7, the knight cannot move. And this allows white to exploit with the move knight d7. Folks, in this position, instead of taking the pawn on h5, which would be a good move, the white player took on f6 with the rook. And here, it's your turn. Black to play and win. Please stop the video. Ask yourself those basic questions. What has become tied down right now? What is that defender that you can try to divert in this position? Please have a logical breakdown first, and then please calculate a short sequence that verify your ideas. Let's do a logical breakdown, folks. The knight on d5 now became the main defender of the rook, which is hit once and defended only once. That's the definition of a loose piece in chess, right? A loose piece is a piece that has equal number of attackers and defenders. In this case, one attacker and one defender. And tactics usually stem from loose pieces. When you see a loose piece, your tactical antenna should give you some signals. As John Nunn says, LPDO, loose pieces drop off in chess. And that usually is correct, right? Tactical hygiene means to pay attention to loose pieces at the board. Now, this knight is also loose, by the way, right? So this knight on d5 is loose, attacked 0 times, defended 0 times. This rook on f6 is loose, attacked once and defended once. So these two pieces should give black an idea in this position. Is there a way to exploit those two loose pieces? And you're a great player if you saw the move knight e7, but you didn't stop there, because after rook d6, well, what's the point of knight e7? Of course, right? Very simple. You want to remove the defender of f6. So if they take on e7, you simply win the exchange with a winning position. But what if white goes rook d6 here, folks? Have you also anticipated this response from white? What if they remove the rook from that spot and also defend their knight on d5? And you're a great player if you found the knight fork, knight f5, right? By playing rook d6, they set up for this knight fork, which nicely wins one full rook for black. You see, 3-ply calculation. Very simple, short calculation for black. That's the first ply. There's only a single move to defend and to third ply to finish off the game directly. But you see, again, you don't find this tactic by like a random search for checks, captures, threats. No, there's much more logical breakdown that is going on in your head, in the orientation phase. When they make a move like this, your tactical antenna should tell you something. Hey, this looks suspicious because white has created 2 loose pieces right now, right? 2 loose pieces on the board. Is there a way for me to exploit that? Then you look at other moves. Maybe rook d2 comes to mind, right? That's also a candidate. Rook d2. Why does it not work? Because rook d2 allows the move rook f5. And here comes the calculation phase, right? You're checking for the best moves for the opponent at all times. Rook f5, and there's no way for the knight to exploit the location of the rook on f5. And white survives in this position. You see? But you're searching for all kind of tactics in this position to exploit that knight, which is the main defender of that rook on f6. Another position from a student game, folks. Black just played the move knight d6 in this position. Please stop the video, look at the whole position, identify those defenders that could be potentially removed, which pieces overworked in this position, are there any loose pieces, and please come up with a good move for white in this position, okay? Let's do it together, folks. Well, by playing knight d6, black has created a loose piece. Why? Because the piece is hit twice and only defended twice. Okay? So this should give you an indication of the knight on d6 could potentially be captured by a tactic. The bishop is now becoming the main guard of that knight, correct? So by playing knight d6, they have basically created a bishop that cannot move. That is basically paralyzed in the duty of defending that knight. But you also observe that the bishop needs to also guard the pawn on g7, correct? So this bishop has now become an overworked piece. Needs to guard the weakness on g7, but also the knight on d6. Is there a way for white to exploit that? Right? Logical breakdown. And by reverse engineering, this move should come to your mind as a natural candidate, right? Because the bishop cannot really move. Otherwise, I take your knight on d6. And this is also a very strong move because your next move is knight e6 check. The knight become a monster, and after bishop takes, rook takes d6, white has won a clear pawn with a crashing positional advantage in this position. That's how you exploited the move knight d6. If you play the move b3 to stop knight c4, then black will play knight e8, and they are guarding g7, and they're also activating their bishop on f8. Black is fine in this position, right? So this was white's chance at this very moment to exploit, to see the problems, tactical problems black is facing, and exploit that by the beautiful removing the guard tactic, which was found by my student. Now, it's white to play here, folks. White has an extra piece in this position. Please stop the video and tell me where should the bishop move from d5. The devil lies in details, and you must always blunder check your moves. Just because an idea looks good doesn't mean that it should always work. We are not doing puzzle rush today, folks. Puzzle rush, you're always finding good moves. It almost never fails, right? In this case, a move looks great, but it fails. And it's your turn, folks. Please stop the video and tell me whether that removing the guard looking tactic works for whites. You're a great player, folks, if you say bishop f7 doesn't work for white, because this on the surface looks like a beautiful removing the guard tactic. After king takes f7, surely we are winning that queen on d8, right? On the surface, it looks like that queen and that king is setting up for a tactic. That king is the only guard of that queen, and this discovered attack sort of situation can win the queen on the next turn. But after bishop f7 check, king f7, the rook is guarding the queen on d8. Can you see it, folks? Can you see why this tactic fails? If there was a bishop on f8, this tactic would work for white. If you go to puzzle rush, there's usually a bishop on f8. So your ideas are usually successful and you win the queen on the next turn. It's a great ability to quickly see this option for white is potentially removing the guard of the queen on d8, but you must be a scientist in chess. Just because an idea looks good doesn't mean that you should play it. You're actively searching for counter evidence from the world that can defeat your ideas. And yes, the counter evidence is this. What if they take? Is there still a way for them to defend their queen on d8? Was this king the only protector of the queen? Well, it's no longer the case after king takes f7 because they're opening up for the rook on h8, correct? This is a very instructive blunder which was made by my student, and he lost the bishop like that. Any move, bishop c4 is good, bishop b3 is good. White has a completely crushing positional advantage with an extra piece as well. Folks, that's a great calculation exercise. It's white to play. The black queen just checked the white king on d2. White has two extra minor pieces here with a clear material advantage, but the king is in the center and you must be careful. So I want you to tell me whether queen c3 is a good move or a blunder, okay? There's only a single move I will give you. I want you to blunder check this move properly, all right? And never trust the surface appearances. I'm here to trick you in this episode. It's always you who need to judge. Please verify this move by a careful blunder check process, okay? Folks, you're a great player if you came up with the entire sequence. Queen c3, rook e2 check, and king d3. Can you see that already from here, folks? I won't put it on the board. I want you to visualize. Queen c3 covers the check and offers a queen trade. That's a great move for white because you want to trade the queens, correct? So the only move you need to calculate is removing the guard tactic, rook e2 check. If the king captures on e2, you're losing your queen on c3. But we're not playing checkers, we are playing chess. At that moment, you're a great player if you saw the move king d3. King d3 will protect the queen on c3, also hitting the rook potentially on e2 once the queen escapes, and you're forcing a queen trade with a winning position. I will put on the board, folks, queen c3. At first sight, it looks unsafe because you're allowing the typical stock standard rook e2, removing the defender tactic for black, but we can play the move king d3, which nicely covers the queen, but also hits the rook, as I mentioned. And now black needs to exchange the queens. If they drop back the queen, let's say to a4, I can take on e2 with a completely winning position. So if you take on e2, by the way, here, of course, then you're giving this move to black, and black is winning. And after rook e2 check, king d3, it turns out that black has no counter trick. There is no rook e3 check, very importantly, because of the bishop on c1. Can you see it, guys? Every single piece matters here. That's what real calculation is about. You're searching for the entire board, looking at the opportunities for both sides. Yes, you will lose knight on h3, but black has no way to exploit that. And of course, queen trade is favoring you because you have two extra pieces in this position. Your task is to consolidate. Your task is to secure your king in this position and then gain tempo, likely to get those pieces back into the game as soon as possible. If you don't play the move queen c3 here, but play the move king d3 instead, the king is in the center of the board, then you're allowing moves like this, followed by b5, and well, you see it, right? The king is not safe. The queen, the king, and even those rooks are eyeing our unsafe king on d3. This becomes more difficult to play for white compared to the move queen c3. Please compare this position, right, which your king looks very, very suspiciously unsafe, with this position that you want to trade the queens, gain tempo, and don't allow them to further activate with moves like this. Now, you can apply the same lesson to a blunder check context, as we mentioned before in this episode, folks. So in this position, say black needs to get the bishop out before playing e6. So I will give you two choices. Do you go to g4 or f5 in this position? Okay, both moves look like reasonable candidates for black. The bishop needs to get out before you go e6. So can you please tell me which move is better and why? That's the key question. Why? Right? Please go through some lines and try to become like a scientist try to actively search for counter evidence from the world before playing one of these moves, because one of these moves is a blunder that connects to our team today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, folks. I did it for several reasons. That's actually a multi-purpose video, right? Maybe we can even turn this into a series, by the way. Maybe I can start a new series on the logical breakdowns of chess tactics. Even chess tactics, to my mind, lands nicely to those why questions for deeper engagement. By asking those why questions today, we learned why removing the defender tactic is a very strong tactical team and resource in chess, and we formed connections. For example, we learned how to see a piece as a tied down piece with a certain defensive function, which means they are lacking mobility, which means they are tied down in defending that stuff. And usually we never want that, right? We want our pieces to be active, to be attacking those targets instead of defending stuff, pawns or mating squares or other loose pieces, for example, right? So we also learned how to have better tactical hygiene, so to speak, so we don't play with those loose pieces. Whenever you see a piece that is tied down in guarding a weakness, you need to ask yourself whether there's a removing the guard tactic. Overworked pieces can be easily chased away from their post, thus giving you material. Queens are the worst defenders in chess for that very reason, right? Again, we are forming connections by those why questions, because this way you're avoiding this blind and trial and error mechanism of check for checks, captures, threats at all times. You will lose on time if the search is completely blind. By engaging in those puzzles, you are becoming much more goal directed. You're learning to get the right cues from the environment, right? Those cues are triggering something in your brain that allows you to smell something or be cautious about a winning tactic for your opponent. That was the main function of this video. I hope you got the right lessons from it, and I hope your tactical vision improves when it comes to removing the guard tactics. And please give me feedback if you want this to become a serious logical breakdowns of chess tactics or the why questions behind chess tactics, just like in our deep learning series, right? I can do maybe more teams on different tactical teams, for example, loose pieces, right? Like pawns and alignments and so on. I can keep on doing this to help you get better at this very fundamental part of chess by also avoiding this blind mechanism of check for check capture threats at all times in a trial and error form. Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this video, folks. How did you find this video? Did it speak to you? And your observations about this overall? And I will catch you on the very next episode on very, very important and beautiful chess teams to help you a better chess player. Bye-bye.